Did you click accept for the?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, welcome to another episode of HCO Third Culture Kid, where I, as a third culture kid, share my thoughts, experiences, and conversations. Today, I am here with Steven, another third culture kid. Hello, Steven. How's it
Hi,
going?
Dan. Thank you for the invite.
Welcome. So Steven reached out to me via Instagram, my very fledgling Instagram social media profile. And
That's right.
we decided to connect, talk a little bit, and then we decided to do this podcast as another fellow third culture kid. How's your week been so far? Have you been busy with work?
No, I didn't work this weekend. I just went out with a few friends Friday and Saturday, and Sunday is usually like, my chore day. So I'll just do laundry, get groceries and stuff like that. Yeah. So it's been good. Yeah. How about yours?
It was very busy. I think I'm pretty sleep
Very
deprived
busy.
throughout the week. This
Oh,
weekend
throughout
was
the
like,
week.
yeah,
Okay.
this weekend I was like catching up a little bit, but throughout the week I was quite busy with the
Mm,
work. I'm still trying to like understand how to edit podcasts and like video and stuff. So it's been a learning curve, and it's been taking some time just to try to learn that a little bit.
yeah. What software do you use? Final Cut Pro or?
I no, I bought this one called, what's it called? Power Director, Cyberlink Power Director.
Oh,
It's not
I've never
bad.
heard of that one. Yeah.
It's pretty good. I like that one. And then for audio, Audacity, but I haven't been using that as much because I've been using video for the podcast form. So
Gotcha.
mostly Power Director. But yeah, I mean, I'm trying to like advertise this podcast more as well too. So I would have the full podcast episode, and I try to edit it into a reel so that I can share in a reel format too. And that takes a bit of
Uh,
time too. So all in all, I think it takes me about like 5 hours, maybe at least, to like fully edit one podcast episode into a format I'd like.
Well, yeah, because like I obviously follow you on Instagram, and I was looking at so I watched your previous episode about, it was a monologue about where you're going to law school, and
Right. Yeah.
you're exploring the opportunity costs. But so I saw that you probably edited the YouTube video, but you also had the reels. So
Yeah.
you're a one-man team. That's like a lot of work,
Is it? Yeah. I
production
feel like it's a
wise.
lot of work. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it
don't know how
is.
other people do it, but yeah, yeah, trying to do that with a full-time job is pretty demanding. Has been, I haven't found a balance yet, and it's been a struggle. So
Got it.
that's how my week has been.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
So we just shared how our week was, but I thought we could also talk about just briefly our background. There's a quick intro of who you are.
Yeah.
So do you want to just share with the audience, or just the people
Yeah.
here who you
I can
are
get started.
very
Yeah. So
briefly?
I'm Steven. I grew up in Korea. Well, I was born in Korea, and then I moved to Bolivia when I was 7. And for those who don't know, Bolivia is a country in the middle of South America, and it's landlocked. We border all these countries. But yeah, so moved to Bolivia when I was 7, and then I was fortunate enough to go to an American school. And so although I do have a weird accent, I was able to learn English and Spanish, of course, because Spanish is our first language.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that did all the way till high school in Bolivia, and then I had the chance to come to college in the States. I went to school in Indiana. Yeah, so that was very interesting, because I was aware, I've been to trips in the East Coast and the West Coast. I have family in California, but I wasn't exposed to the Midwest. So that was very, very interesting. And I hadn't even seen snow, so seeing snow for the first time. I guess I've seen
Yeah, that's
snow in
true.
Korea, but yeah, I'm digressing. So yeah, so after college in the States, I came to New York, and I've been here for the past 4.5 years. Yeah. I
Yeah.
work in a I work in a financial institution doing like data stuff. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Nice. Yeah. What a lot of traveling. Um, how long were you in Bolivia then? For how many years?
Around 11.
11. So you were in Korea for maybe like 7 years, and then you moved to Bolivia
That's
then.
right. That's right. Yeah. And it was
Hmm.
very interesting. I still remember I literally still remember. It was very. I vividly remember the day we landed to Bolivia. So
Uh-huh.
I grew up in this city called Santa Cruz, and it's very hot. So a lot of people think Bolivia is like very cold and like very mountainous, which is true. Like
Yeah.
they have this like imagery of like llamas and alpacas and like and mountains and stuff,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like the indigenous people wearing their like ponchos. And that's also like pretty accurate, but like where I grew up, it's more tropical. So I would say like climate wise is similar to Brazil, like where you grew up.
Uh,
So I still remember how stuffy it was when we landed to the airport, and it was just like I couldn't even breathe because of the humidity and stuff. It was just
yeah.
so stuffy and so hot and disgusting. I was like, oh my god! I was like, Mom, I can't breathe.
When you were 8
Um,
or 7, you remember this?
yeah,
Oh
yeah, I
wow, it was
remember
that
this.
bad?
Yeah, yeah, it was really bad. But then once we got into the car and like we had the AC on, it was better. And I still remember we used to live in this like apartment complex, I guess,
Yeah.
and I didn't speak a word of Spanish, but my dad taught me a few words just for
Oh, your
survival. And
dad knew how to speak Spanish before he came.
that's right. So a little bit of background, I guess. Like, he went to the foreign language university. Yeah,
Thing.
yeah. I don't
No
know what it's
way.
called.
My
Is it
dad went
the
to that school too. He knows my
really?
dad knows how to speak Spanish as well, which is why I was like, "Oh, your dad knew how to speak Spanish. I have
Wait,
experience with
so
this."
so maybe they're like
Maybe they know each other.
Sambe and
It's very
Hube. Yeah.
possible. I'm gonna have to
What?
ask.
Okay, we're gonna have
We'll,
to.
we'll,
Yeah,
we'll we'll
we're
connect offline.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They probably know each other. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. I
Mm.
wonder how the class size was probably small during that time, like a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow. That's
and like
crazy.
talking to my dad, like a lot of his like Spanish major friends ended up in like South American countries and stuff. So it's very likely that
Dude,
they know each other. Yeah.
dude, yeah. Anyway, let's connect offline. But anyway, yeah. So your dad spoke you, taught you Spanish a little bit.
Yeah. So I remember like some of my survival words were like
Survival
hola,
words.
yeah, or
Uh-huh.
like there was a swimming pool. So like I remember piscina, which was like it was my way of asking like my new friends, like, hey, you guys want to go to the pool?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So that was very interesting to sort of, um, learn the language from scratch. And obviously at that young age, you're so young that you just like absorb it and learn it really quickly.
Yeah.
But that was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So now you're pretty fluent, huh?
Yeah. So
With Spanish.
I would say Spanish is my most, I guess, like competent
You
language.
think it's your strongest language, Spanish?
For sure. For sure. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Dude, I can't say that about myself.
Really?
I think English is my strongest language. Brazil is
Really?
like, yeah, and because I think the American school part really, because that's what the primary language I learned in. So I'm surprised yours was Spanish, but I guess I might just be an anomaly. And then Brazil's like Brazilian Portuguese is like a close third, second, maybe slightly above Korean. Yeah, but
Are you
Portuguese isn't that
fluent?
good.
Are you fluent in Korean?
I would say fluent, yes, but I wouldn't say native.
Okay.
Yes.
Wait, so do you talk to your parents in Korean?
I talk to my parents in Korean. Yeah, yeah.
Would you, if you went to Korean restaurant in the States, would you talk in Korean?
Sometimes, yeah,
Okay, okay. So
yeah.
you're good. You're
I
good.
see.
Yeah.
So that's like your test of fluency in Korean. And
Yeah, yeah,
people
yeah,
people
yeah.
have different tests. I feel like for mine is like
Yeah.
you can't watch dramas in Korean without subtitles and understand it.
Okay. Did you watch Squid Game?
I did, yeah, yeah.
Okay, did you watch it in Korean? Of course, right?
Well, yes, but I use subtitles here and there. There are some
But
words I
did you
don't.
notice?
Well, did
I'm
I?
sorry, go ahead.
No, no, no. What were you guys? Did I notice? I'm curious now with the question.
Did you notice how bad the translation was
No,
from Korean to English?
no, I
The
didn't know.
subtitle the subtitles were horrible.
Really, was it that bad? I didn't think they were that
Yeah,
bad.
it was so bad. Yeah.
Do you have an example, like a word that they mistranslated so bad or a
I
sentence?
don't
You can.
remember. I don't remember, but there's so many articles. Like apparently they only spent like 6K for like translation.
Really?
and it was really off at times. I was like, okay, I was like, my Korean, I'm not like a native Korean speaker, but like I can clearly tell the translation is poor to say the least. Yeah.
Really? I didn't even notice. Maybe I don't know if it's because my Korean is maybe poorer than I thought, or because I wasn't paying attention to the subtitles as much. I don't know which one it was. Yeah.
I'm sure your Korean is good. You're just focused on the plot.
Thanks for the benefit of the doubt. But it's probably not as great as I thought then. But so yeah, language wise, English is my stronger language. For you, it's Spanish. Well, yeah. Would you do you want to say
Yeah,
do you want to say like something in Spanish to introduce yourself very quickly, like hola, blah
sure.
blah blah.
Well, we could talk in Portuñol. You could talk in Portuguese, and I could talk in Spanish.
Yeah,
But yeah, sure. I'll do my intro. Yeah, hola, me llamo Steven y soy coreano, pero he vivido en Bolivia y ahora vivo en Nueva York. Y sí, estamos en el podcast con Dan, hablando de cosas de what do you, I don't know how to say third culture kid, pero sí, estoy emocionado de hablar con Dan y poder aprender de las experiencias que son similares pero también diferentes en nuestras vidas por temas culturales. Yeah.
interesting. I think I understood that. I'm excited to be on this podcast and share our experiences and
Yeah,
together
yeah.
with it. Yeah.
You probably understand because like it's similar, you know.
Sometimes I can't. Sometimes people speak way too fast in Spanish, and I'm like, what does this guy say? But this one I
Well,
understood.
well, it's the
Yeah.
same thing with Portuguese. I feel like some people speak like really fast.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I could, yeah, I never got that sense too much. Sometimes they do speak really fast, but I can still understand. But sometimes when you talk to people who are from Portugal and
oh
you
yeah,
speak Portuguese, that is so difficult. It's like not even like it's not like the equivalent of like British English. It's just so different. It sounds like a completely different language. So yeah, that one I don't understand. But yeah, I can introduce myself a little bit as well in Portuguese. Probably not as great as you. I haven't spoken Portuguese in a while,
hey, no judgment.
but
And you're better at Portuguese than me, clearly. So
clearly we'll see. We'll see. But olá, meu nome é HD. It's my nickname, meu apelido. Ou Dan, e estou fazendo um podcast com o Steven aqui. E eu morei no Brasil por 16 anos. Estou aqui nos Estados Unidos já faz quantos anos? Acho que 11 anos. 11
wow,
anos. Um, esse é mim.
muito legal.
Obrigado. Obrigado. Cool.
Nice.
Yeah. Wait, so I kind of want to dig more about your background a little bit. So, okay, but you went to an American school
Yeah.
in Bolivia. What was it also an international school, or was it just termed just an American school?
I mean, yeah, I think so. I've been to your school. I mean, we had a conversation before the podcast briefly. So I've been to your school, and I think the scale of your school is like a lot bigger, and like you certainly have more international people in your school. So so I would say my school was American, but it was like smaller scale. We had like maybe like 50 people per class. Um,
So about half maybe of my school
yeah,
ish.
and most of the people were actually Bolivians, right? So like most of my
Oh,
classmates were Bolivians. So there were not like, kids from, diplomats or American people. Yeah. We
got
had a
it.
few of those, but the majority were Bolivians. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there something you're snapping in the background or something? I could hear a
Yeah.
little
Sorry.
snap or
It was like,
something.
I think it was like a nervous tick. Yeah. I was
There.
playing around
Oh
with
yeah.
my marker. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. I used to do that too, but then I became hyper
Sorry.
alert to it when I
Uh,
used to do that as well. No need to
okay.
apologize.
I'll stop. Yeah.
But if there's like a more silent one you can use too, feel free to use that. I have
Oh, no, no.
sometimes I use this ring.
Nice.
uh nice. So yeah, so it was different from my school a little bit. But
Yeah.
yeah, your story and my story have so many parallels. I also went to an American school, grew up there until college, and then moved to the States as well too. Um, yeah, Bolivian school. what did you like about Bolivia that you appreciated a lot after you left and you went to the States?
That's a great question because like a lot of my American friends, they don't really know much about Bolivia. So, they have questions like how was growing up in Bolivia or like there's also an element of like there's not that many Asian people in Bolivia compared to Brazil, right? So that's also interesting. And I don't think I got overall, I think the experience was very positive. I think I had a great childhood. Like for instance, like I could mention stuff like so my parents were not wealthy by no means,
Yeah.
but for instance, I was able to learn how to play golf because like one of my best friends, Pablo, he was really into golfing, and my parents were working all the time. We have a small family business, but
Yeah.
they were able to take me with them, and like we would just go to a driving range and learn how to play golf. Obviously, like golf is associated with like I don't know prestige and like elitism in the states, but that was certainly not my background. It was just like me, trying to learn the sport, and I was able to do so as a kid. So that's something cool. I also have like learning the language is also a cool feature. To be honest, I haven't used it that much in the States and from like a work context,
Mm.
but I think it helps you. I think I'm open-minded in that sense where like you learn the language and then you sort of like learn also the culture and the different ways of thinking. Clearly, at least for me, the Bolivian or the Latino culture is very different to like the Korean culture. And we could draw so many parallels and compare. And if you want to like delve deeper, we can.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, those are some of the things, I guess. I also had some interesting moments. I think in terms of identity crisis, like there was a point in my
While you're in Bolivia.
yeah, for sure.
Mm.
Because most of my friends were Bolivian, and I didn't go to like a Korean church or whatnot to sort of have like my own community and my own like identity, I guess. So that was an interesting moment where it was like, like yeah, I don't look like most of my friends. So
There's a small Asian community in Bolivia, or not at
there
all?
is a there is a very small Asian community in Bolivia, but it's not as I don't know. I feel like when I visited Brazil, like Sao Paulo,
There's a kind of a good size of Korean
it's a
community.
sizable. Yeah, I would say it's more of a melting pot where
Yeah.
you have all these like different cultural influences,
Yeah.
and it was really cool to see that. Well, my best friend he's Korean Bolivian. He's like me. Okay,
Right, right.
so that his name is Pablo. Yeah. So yeah, he has a Spanish name, but he's Korean, right?
Yeah.
But then the rest of my friends were mostly Bolivian, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then at the same time, they can't relate the Korean side of things, like when you talk to your Bolivian friends, like they can't relate to some of the Korean elements or Korean cultures or the
Well,
way you're. What do you mean?
what were some of the elements you were thinking that you wouldn't be able to
Like
like share as much or relate as much with your Bolivian friends?
like they probably didn't understand like why my parents were like specific way. Like I don't know. I feel like typical Korean parents want you to do well in school or stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe culturally they can be classified as more conservative. Um, yeah, little things like that.
Mm. I was thinking more like for me, you can't talk about K-pop as much to your Bolivian friends. Like I could talk about K-pop and share them a song I really liked and I thought was like really moving because they would understand. Maybe
That's a good one.
times would have been different if we went to school at this time because K-pop is now pretty big, but I don't know if K-pop is really big. Probably when I say K-pop, it's like BTS, and I don't like listen to their music that much, so I wouldn't have that much to share anyway if it was just about BTS. Anyway, yeah, but things
That's a
like
good
that.
point. Yeah.
Yeah. things like that I wasn't like able to share as much too. Even like Korean dramas wasn't as big, I think, so couldn't talk about it as much. But yeah, those are some of the things. In my experience, I wasn't able to share as much too. And with my friends, I talked about these a lot, quite a bit too. But yeah, you're right. How you grew up in a Korean household, very different, I think, than maybe what a traditional Bolivian family would raise their kids with, and what kind of cultural values they would raise their kids with. Um, so you think in your Korean household you were raised with like a Korean upbringing and Korean tradition, pretty much?
I would say so. Yeah, we ate Korean food, and like
Oh yeah.
my parents are both Korean, right? So like a lot of the values that they like pass on to you are quite Korean. And maybe it's slightly different with my sister. I have a younger sister.
You do, me too.
Oh,
Dude,
really?
way too many parallels. Dad might have got to the same school.
Gosh,
It's
yeah.
crazy. By how much younger?
So she's a lot young. She's 8 years younger.
Okay, that's different. Mine's like 1 year younger.
Okay, so you guys are more like friends. Yeah.
Yeah, more so. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
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 For me, it was like I was like the second dad because like there was such an age gap.
Yeah.
I mean, she's a
I
freshman in college right now.
right now. Nice.
Yeah.
How is she
Yeah.
how is she liking it? In the States or
Yeah.
or
She's in your coast actually. Yeah.
oh really? Is she
Not
liking
too
it?
far. Yeah, not too far from where you went. Yeah, I think she likes it. Yeah.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Well, California is very different from Indiana, I imagine. So I imagine she's gonna have a different experience than you. There's a much
Oh,
bigger Asian community in
for sure.
California. Yeah.
Yeah. So she was telling me like all of her friends are mostly Asian.
Yeah.
Whereas I went to a very predominantly white school. Like we were like 70% white.
Yeah. Oh
So like
damn. Indiana. Yeah.
yeah. So diversity and inclusion wasn't like a huge thing. But yeah, I liked my experience nonetheless. Yeah, I think it was quite formative. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure it was a how, actually how is I don't know if it was much of a contrast. How is the ethnic makeup in your school in Bolivia when you were in Bolivia? Was it like predominantly white or not really? It was just a lot
Yeah, I
predominantly
mean,
Bolivian.
I'm sure it was similar to your scenario, but like these people, I mean, most of my friends had like multiple like nationalities and
And this
passports.
is uh-huh.
Yeah, so I don't think I had a lot of like indigenous friends, like some of them,
Mm,
but they were mostly European descent, whether that is Spanish, German, Italian, yeah, mostly European descent. And in terms of the timeline, like when they moved to Bolivia, I'm not too sure, but
mm,
they're mostly white. Yeah.
okay. Okay. So there's some of a parallel between that experience and then your experience in Indiana, at least in terms of like the ethnic. If you take a
Yeah.
step back, it's like if it's like a white, predominantly white group of people,
Hmm.
you know, interesting,
Yeah.
but it's different. But yeah, I mean, I like you said, the Brazilians, at least in my experience, the ethnic makeup would be of such a hodgepodge. Like one person
Mm.
would have like Italian, and then maybe some other European, and then a mix of Brazilian, maybe. Um, so even though you would look at that person, you think, oh yeah, he's white, but if you look deeper into their descent and their ancestry, it's not quite that simple. So I do think it's a little bit different.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
some are Lebanese as well, and like it's just very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, there'd be like I think one was like part Russian as well too. Um, but I think maybe the States is like that too. I don't know if we just get lost in the word like, oh, these people are white, whatnot. But there's probably a lot more complex, different like ancestry behind that. Italian it could be German, it could be Russian as well.
Polish. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think we might just get lost when we just say the word white. Um,
Yeah. Maybe
yeah,
because we're Asian, we don't notice the nuances as much.
yeah,
Whereas if you're white and you're like you come from a Polish background, you definitely know what's like Polish and what's like Ukrainian versus what's Russian, and you have like all these like nuances and you notice them. I don't know. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. They probably are, yeah. they're broad strokes I think we use sometimes in language that really misses out on the details and and sometimes misunderstandings. Um. Anyway, what were we talking about before this?
We're talking
Uh.
about, I don't know, but it
Oh,
was
yeah,
like,
Bolivian. Yes. How was it with sister in California? Um. Before that, I forgot. Oh, well, actually, I don't know what we were talking about exactly, but you were talking about how your best friend's Korean Bolivian. So my
yeah.
experience too, my best friends are like Korean American, Korean Japanese, not Korean Japanese, sorry,
Mm,
Japanese, Brazilian, or whatnot. But I think it's because we relate to those people the most, and it's just so hard to depart from like my ethnic identity from
yeah.
myself and interacting with people and relating to somebody. So me too. I mean, I was closest and related most to a Korean American or somebody who grew up in Brazil who was also Korean as well. But yeah, it's just a natural thing, right? It's just a natural thing
Right.
where we were like really clicked with those people. And the cultural like um synchrony was there too. Like you said, like Korean household was also living in um South American culture and not catering, but like syncing on both of those cultures. Only somebody that was also Korean or an Asian, who also was also living in a South American country, could also relate fully to like that cultural palette that I had. Yeah, I don't know if
Yeah, I think
that's
that's a great way to put it. Yeah, definitely more eloquent than what I tried to express. Yeah.
no man. I completely got you. I completely
Hey,
got you. Our
can I use
backgrounds
the
are so
restroom?
similar. What? Oh, yes.
Can I
Go
use the
ahead.
restroom?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Sorry about that.
No, no, all good. Hey, look, you have a Dyson. I woke up like 30 minutes before the podcast. So I'm eating breakfast right now. I'm definitely going to chew with my mouth closed so I don't sound very intrusive during the podcast. Let me try to finish this right now before Steven comes back. Damn, that was real fast. That
Hey,
was
I'm
fast,
back.
dude. That was
I had to
fast.
pee.
I I, I could surmise that. Given the speed. Oh. Hmm. Well, I feel like we've kind of already implicitly talked about what we think is like a third culture kid, but the definition for me of a third culture kid wasn't really introduced to me until maybe late or early in college. But for
Oh,
you, yeah, for you, when did you find out about that term, understand what it was, and then in the end, how do you define a third culture kid?
ooh, those are really good questions. I think I was exposed to the term by, so I did like a summer program in my high school years in at Stanford, and I was able
Uh-huh.
to meet actually a lot of like new people, and I found it like a very interesting experience. And one of the girls, she was British, but she was born in Tokyo, but her parents were British, and then she grew up in Singapore.
Oh,
So I think she introduced the term to me. So I was like, oh, that's what I am. So it was kind of interesting to sort of like finally like find a label for yourself, you know?
yeah.
Um, so that's when I first was introduced to the term. And in terms of like what do I think it means? I think it just means that, I mean, it doesn't have to be three, or it could be more, right? And it could be for multiple reasons. Like you could be ethnically just Korean like us, but have diverse culture experiences just by living in different places. But you could
Mm.
also be a third culture kid if you were, I don't know, a mixed kid, like ethnically.
Uh-huh.
And being exposed to to different cultures that way because your mom introduces this part of the culture and your dad introduces like this part of the culture. But then at the same time, I think it's weird because especially in New York City, like there's so much diversity.
Yeah.
Um, and like even my colleagues, like some of my colleagues are married and they have kids, and like I don't know, like the girl, the woman is Chinese, but the husband is like American, but he's actually like Spanish. But his dad is Colombian, and his mom is like Russian. So like when like I feel like I don't know when to put the line between you're a TCK versus you're just American or whatever nationality that you sort of like bundle in, you know?
Uh-huh.
Um,
Interesting.
I don't,
So
especially like in America, given that it's such a melting pot, like you have so many different cultures mixing. You can argue the same thing about Brazil and South America too, I guess. But I don't know when to put the line
the
between
line
these
between
two, I
third
guess.
culture and somebody that maybe just is bicultural, maybe, or yeah, just multiple cultures. So I looked this up. The official definition of a third culture kid is someone who grew up in a culture that's different from the one that their parents were raised in. So that's quote unquote the official definition. But I think the feelings that we get as a third culture kid are probably what resonates with us in terms of the identity of like a third culture kid. And I feel like an important part of being a third culture kid is this clash kind of cultures that you feel within yourself. Like, there's a distinct part of you that holds Korean values and Korean culture. And then there's like another distinct part of you that is trying to reconcile another culture, like a Bolivian culture background. And then for me, like a Brazilian background culture. Um, for me, I feel like if there's no sense of reconciliation that you're doing within yourself, but I don't know if you feel like a third culture kid or you're feeling like what a third culture kid feels. So if like a parent is, if you have one parent from another culture and another parent from another culture, but they're like very American maybe, or they're raising the child in a very American culture, and a child doesn't quite feel that tension between cultures or something, or this reconciliation that they're doing, then I wouldn't classify that child as a third culture kid or that person. But if the kid, this is just my kind of like sense and my experience of being what I call a third culture kid. But if the parents were from different cultures, and this is probably falling outside of the formal definition of a third culture kid, that if a parent was like grew up in like a European culture and another parent grew up in an African culture, for example, and the kid was that's tough. If a kid is bilingual because of that, and they're also they learn different parts of the culture, and they learn another part of the African culture and another part of the European culture from their parents, would you call that person? And they're growing up in the States. Would you call that? Actually, yeah, I'd probably call that person a third culture kid. But
That's
what
where it
if
gets really complicated for me because let's say the woman, yeah, the wife is from Ethiopia and the dad is from I don't know, wherever,
Britain, whatever it was,
UK, and
yeah.
they meet in New York and they conceive a baby in New York. So the baby has both cultures, but he's also a New Yorker, like he has a New York culture too and American identity. So it's like,
No, that's for sure. Okay, that's for sure. Probably the third culture kid at that point. Yeah, because he's probably exposed to so many different cultures now, Ethiopian,
yeah,
British, and also American. Okay, no, that's probably shoe in for sure. That's a third culture kid. But what if that kid grew up in Ethiopia, and then the mother is Ethiopian and the father is British? Would you would we call that kid a third culture kid? I think there's probably a weaker case to call that kid a third culture kid because that's
I
it, and
think I
it
agree.
yeah, it's attuned with the Ethiopian culture. Um, and but then I think what the person would be then would be bicultural maybe, but I don't know about a third culture kid. Also the term third culture kid kind of confuses me. Like, does it have to be three cultures that the kid was being like surrounded by? I guess for us, I mean, for us, really, it was only two cultures, right? It was Korean and Bolivian, or Korean and Brazilian. But what's the third part? Like, why is it
The
called third?
American.
The
It's the
American.
American.
But if you and I grew up in went to a Brazilian school or entirely Bolivian school, would we not be third culture kids? Because the definition of a third culture kid formally is a kid who grew up in a culture that's different in the formative years, especially from the one that their parents were raised in. So technically, even if we were raised in went to a Bolivian school or Brazilian school, we would fall under that definition of a third culture kid.
Yes, I hear you. I see what you're saying. Um,
But
well, yeah, I have a few thoughts, but like, so what you said before really resonated with me. Because I sometimes feel like I have like multiple personas
yeah,
per culture. It's the same Steven, but it's like Bolivian persona Steven, like Korean persona Steven,
yeah,
and then like American persona Steven. It's the same
yeah,
person. It's the same person, but I think what resonated with me was like you're trying the clash of cultures and you're trying to like reconcile them, but sometimes you can't really reconcile them. It's not like an accounting like like debit credit like double ledger system where everything just matches. It's not like that,
Oh, I like that
and
analogy. Yeah.
and in the context, it really depends on the context of things. Like if I'm interacting with my grandparents and it's like a very Korean setting, like some of my personalities that are maybe more in the Bolivian persona or American persona don't come into light as much.
Yeah.
And like I'm applying this. I think you could say the same thing about Dan at work is perceived differently to Dan at play.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So like
You're right. Yeah.
the context in which people like perceive you and interact with you are very different.
Right. And in those, you also assume maybe different personas.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is like, with that being said, where you currently live also sort of like magnifies one culture versus, and sort of like it puts the light in one culture, and it's sort of like the other cultures are more in the shadow, if you want to say.
Huh?
So I think because we live in the States now,
Yeah.
we're more Americanized.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas, well, this is an obvious statement, but like, whereas if I had lived in Korea, or if I went to uni in Korea, or if I just stayed in Bolivia, um, I think I would have been either more Korean or Bolivian. If that makes
Yeah.
sense.
No, I agree. Yeah. I think also in Layton, what you're saying is like, yeah, obviously context kind of informs how you interact, what kind of actions you do, and how you behave as well too. But there are different levels of context. Like where you live is a different context level than like where you work too. But still, they're all within the realm of context. Um, and that similarly, then country where you live, where you work, in different strengths and different manners will affect like how you behave, what kind of personalities you might adopt. Because I feel that too. When I speak Portuguese versus like when I speak Korean, a part of me feels I feel like this trigger for like personalities comes when I speak different languages. I just suddenly there's just a collection of personality traits that I think comes along with language when I start speaking it. Like for example, with Brazilian, I might feel a little bit more like expressive potentially, and then with
Yeah,
Korean, it's more like held back but also polite, being mindful of that.
exactly, exactly,
Yeah, there's a
exactly.
little bit of that. And then I guess the lines become blurry with like, is this a personality trait or kind of me trying to adapt to that culture specifically? And so I also wanted to ask, and I guess I'll share first. Like, yes, we have like this tension and like reconciliation, but then how I resolve that somehow, because at some point I think third culture kids will have to live with that and also absorb that into their identity and then like find
Yeah,
out like this is how you don't like consciously think about it, but if you like take a deep look, this is kind of how your personality kind of unfolds as you're trying to reconcile it. But for me, I just feel like with all this blurriness, it just means that there's no one culture that's right, and that's kind of how I've like reconciled it. How I He's like, if I talk to Korean and they see me talk a little bit, they think I'm like really expressive. If I talk to Brazilian, they don't think I'm expressive as much. So me, the same person, kind of is perceived in different ways by different people, but they perceive me in the kind of the prototype or the archetype of a different culture, of the other culture. Brazilians would perceive me as like maybe more of like polite, as you know, Korean
Yeah.
tradition would, but the Koreans would perceive me maybe more as more expressive, which is what Brazilians may be perceived of generally or traditionally or stereotypically. Uh, but all those in those lines too, I think. So I've taken all these different elements of these different cultures, kind of assumed it in my different personalities. The perception of my personality is different from others, even though I've absorbed, like, I think, different personality traits. And then in that, I just think like there's no one right way to do it. And I feel like American English, the English language, then is brings about this medium of what I've learned from Brazil and what I learned from Korean as well. To me, it's like this like
Mm.
middle ground kind of bringing those two different cultures in. And then,
Mm.
but then if I talk in Korean too, then Korean becomes a middle ground of like bringing in what I learned from American culture and Brazilian culture. So I just let the lines
That's
blur.
fascinating.
Yeah, I don't know
That's
if you relate,
fascinating.
but maybe everybody has a different way of like reconciling, but that's kind of how I think I just let the lines blur instead of like trying to say this is how you do it in Korean, this is how you do it in Brazilian, and then
Yeah.
depending on which language I speak, I bring in those different elements and let the lines blur because I'm comfortable with saying like there's no one culture that's right, and that's kind of how I have. That's kind of the conclusion I've drawn in trying to reconcile all these cultures in me. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, this has been, yeah, it's really interesting to see how you process, and very insightful to see how you use one culture to bridge the other two in certain situations. Yeah.
Kind of, yeah. How did you think about this? Like, if you do have
Yeah.
this like tension of like division of like this culture and that culture, did you think about how
Yeah.
you like processed it, or have you arrived at a conclusion of whatnot and like resolving
Yeah.
that tension of culture clash?
Yeah. For me, it was more like, I think, yeah, a lot of the things that you said resonated with me. But for me, it was like, I sort of like looked internally, like, as in like I told you about the mini like identity crisis that I had. So I was like, oh, who am I? Like, I'm not fully Bolivian and I'm not fully Korean, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm like a wannabe American, you know? So it's like, who am
One of the
I? You
American.
know? Yeah. So it was like, okay, like I don't really fit in the mold of any of the cultures. So who am I? And the conclusion was, oh, like I'm not none of these cultures, but I'm actually like all of these cultures. So it's very similar to what you said, where like you're fine with the lines being blurred, and you actually believe that like all cultures are correct. Like not one culture is incorrect, and not one culture is like correct. So I think that's how I embraced it. There's also like a religious element where I'm a Christian, so well, I'm not sure how much we want to talk about this, but
Oh, you can talk about it freely but as comfortably as you'd like. Because yeah, I have a Christian background as well, but I am not
yeah,
Christian now.
okay, okay,
Yeah, so I've definitely explored it and had a lot of thoughts and conversations about it too. So I am comfortable talking about it. I may not be an expert, but
yeah,
you can feel free to talk about it as comfortable as you are.
yeah. Well, I don't want to delve too deep into it, but I think like having an identity in religion also helps to sort of like reconcile the different cultural
Really
blurriness. Yeah, yeah.
interesting.
That's how I approached it. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, for me, religion didn't play a big role in my identity, I think. Yeah.
Really? Was it always
No,
separate, culture and religion, or I'm just curious?
I don't think if you I don't know if they're separate. That's a good point because the religion will bring about certain values, right, and how you should conduct your life too, and um, yeah, how you should conduct your life. But I don't think I processed that these might be something I would have to reconcile and kind of like inform one another.
Hmm.
If you think about it, a lot of I mean, the American Constitution itself, there's a lot of Christian underpinnings to it. So
Yeah.
I think there's maybe I don't know if I felt a strong sense of needing to reconcile the religious values with the cultures I was trying to reconcile. I mean, even in all these cultures, including religion, there's a common thread, like be honest, have integrity. So there are many things you didn't have to reconcile and just were more emphasized because you heard that from different cultures. Um,
Hmm.
and I don't know if religion, at least my experience, offered something that or presented something that I needed to reconcile very strongly. Actually, no, I take that back. There were definitely something, and then as I grew up Christian and was learning about Christianity, that I found very difficult to reconcile. But I don't know if that came from like a cultural place, but just from a thinking through personally and logically, rationally kind of place. So I don't, yeah, I don't know if I just, yeah, the cultural arena that my identity played in was what brought like religion into it as an element. But interesting. I think that might be different maybe between you and me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's fair. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Third culture kids by definition, I think also they're so similar too, but we probably have a ton of different backgrounds. And then the personalities that come out of third culture kids are probably very different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So when did you I again as comfortable as you are too, but when did you start going to church and when did you become introduced to like Christianity?
Well, I sort of grew up, you know, going to church.
When you were
My
very young too?
university. Yeah, yeah,
Oh, I see, I see.
from a pretty young age. Um, which I guess in a lot of like Korean households is like pretty similar. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, mine too. But yeah, that changed when I got into high school and
Hmm.
then college as well. But yeah, maybe we can talk about that at a different episode. I think
Yeah.
it could go long.
It could be very interesting. Yeah. It's like
It
all
could,
these like
yeah,
existential questions and whatnot. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'm sure there'd be a lot of interesting thoughts in that. Um, cool. What were we talking about before this? I keep forgetting what we were talking about before this. When I try to like grasp it, like wait, where should I take? Where should we bring this conversation to next? Like,
Oh, I have a question. So like if you were to quantify your cultural ness, like what would you say? Like what percentage
oh,
is
percentage.
Korean? What,
Oh, you're right. We ask these questions for ourselves, huh?
yeah.
I had an answer a long time ago, like maybe 5 years ago, but I forgot what that answer was. And I think it's still true, but I think I'd say uh, 30% Korean culturally. Surprisingly, I think it's my weakest language, but culturally maybe 30% Korean.
Yeah.
Um, American might be more. I'd say 40% American, I think, and then maybe 30%. Honestly, Brazilian, I would say like 20%. I
Wow.
think Brazilian, I think it'd be more like 20%.
And Americans 50.
American might, but yeah, I mean, we'll add 5% to each of Korean and American.
Because
Yeah,
I think you're more American than I am.
possibly. Yeah, you
And
don't
my
know.
and
Yeah,
my ratio, I think my ratio is 30 Bolivian, 40 American, 30 Korean.
30 Korean, you said?
Yeah.
30 Korean, 40 Bolivian, and then 30
No, 40
American,
American, 40 American, and then 30.
Bolivian.
Yeah.
Wow, so you're also the biggest percentage is American. Dude, that's so
I
odd.
think I think so, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But I just think so because I'm living in the States and like, yeah.
Yeah. It's also the primary language you speak now, for sure, right? Like the most.
Yeah, and exactly. And like most of my interactions are with Americans. So
I honestly, I think for me also it has to just do with for some reason I just assume, and it might just be part of the American culture too, where like there's a huge part of American culture is the immigrant culture and embracing immigrants too, right? So
yeah.
there's just this, I don't know, this natural third party esque background or platform in the American culture and language, in which allows my other cultures to coexist. Like when I speak in English and I think about the American culture, I don't think it's something I have to reconcile with like my Korean and Brazilian culture. But if I think about the Korean culture, I feel like it's sometimes something I have to reconcile with the Brazilian culture because sometimes they clash. Like how physical touchy can you be in Brazilian culture compared to like Korean culture? Like Brazilians who like we
Oh,
hug so
that's a
much.
big one. Yeah.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
Koreans we don't hug as much too.
Yeah.
In Brazilian language, you can talk to your elders
Yeah.
with like just as you would talk to someone who's younger as well too. I'm sure in the States you can do that as well. So that's something. But there's just more things I thought I had to reconcile with the Brazilian culture, and maybe that's just because of the product of me living in Brazil as well. So the American culture just felt more of like I don't know about neutral, but just
More
less
abrasive.
perhaps. Yeah. It just yeah. I don't know. I can't put a finger to it, but it's just something about that culture that was like a medium to be able to bring my other cultures in and
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
less of a clash. Yeah.
That makes
Yeah.
total sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think you might understand more than somebody who didn't, who's not a third culture kid. But yeah, there was that feeling there. Yeah. Interesting ratio. But yeah, I guess you and I both think of ourselves as American now. Do you like would you, would you want to live in the States permanently?
I think so. In the
Yeah.
near future, I still see myself in New York, but I don't know, like 10 years from now, will I still be in New York? Probably not. You know, I think I would like to have kids eventually and settle down and that kind of stuff. But yeah, you never know. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I like the States. I want to stay here permanently as well. What do you like about it so much? I mean, you and I both grew up in a different culture for so long. So I do find it interesting. I mean, I have my reasons why I wouldn't want to move back to Brazil, but I do find it
Mhm.
interesting when you talk to a lot of people like, yeah, they want to stay in the States and they wouldn't want to move back if they had to choose between Bolivia/Brazil or the
Yeah.
States. Yeah. But
Yeah. I mean,
why would you want to
there's,
stay in the States compared to going back to Bolivia or even Korea?
yeah, I could give you like just like reasons that I haven't thought about it like super deeply, but well, I guess like the education in the States compared to Bolivia, it's like higher quality, right? So if I were to pursue like further education or even just like undergrad education, I think I did get a lot out of it. Gave me a job in the States, and just like sort of like a career to like sort of get me going in the States, right? I've always like dreamt about like moving to New York City. Obviously, maybe not for the right reasons. Mostly through like movies and so many like cultural references that
Yeah.
I guess sort of like Hollywood sort of like inculcate us. Like New York City being as this like great city,
Yeah.
which I still think is true, and I love New York for that reason, right? And that's like why I chose to come to New York, and thankfully I was
Mhm.
able to do so through a job. So yeah, economic opportunities would be like another reason, right? So there are like great jobs and like great prospects for your career growth. If you, I still think the States is a place where like if you work hard and you grind and
Yeah, I resonate with that. Yeah. That's what I really like about the
you
States too.
you put yourself out there, it's still meritocratic where you can make a life for yourself.
Yeah.
What else? The political stability. That's another one.
Oh,
You laugh about this because you feel it.
yeah, in
Even
Brazil
like
too. Yeah.
yeah, even today in Bolivia right now, they're going on a strike because there are all these like new laws being proposed, and a lot of the people are against it. So they've been going on strike for a week, and it's just very messy. And yeah, I don't know what to say about it. Yeah, but political stability is also important, and I think, as you said, there is this element of embracing immigrants about America, where you say where you said it's more inclusive in that sense.
Mhm.
So I think it'd be nice to like settle down in the States. Maybe if
Oh,
things
you're
work
doing
out,
that
like
thing
have
again
kids.
with your pen.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, I just noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah, with kids.
Yeah, have kids down the line, and
Education. Yeah, honestly, I think everything you said are the reasons as well that I would want to stay in the States. I really like that meritocratic element.
yeah,
Granted, I don't know what it would be like working in Brazil fully and like working in Korea. Maybe it would have been meritocratic as much too. So I don't have that experience, but just my perception is that like in terms of a strong meritocracy, America stands at top compared to those other two countries. So that's one too for sure. Um, Political stability. Yeah, I honestly everything you said I think are the big reasons why I wouldn't want to stay in the States as well too. And embracing the immigrant culture. I mean, Brazil embraces immigrant culture to an extent, but it's different. Like there's a lot of Japanese immigrants in Brazil as well, a lot of Korean immigrants as well. Um, but
how
there's a
is it
lot
different?
more. There's a more. I first just how I feel as well too, and I think the rhetoric used in embracing immigrants and different diversities in America versus Brazil. There's just a lot more pomp about it, like diversity. Um, there's regulation as well that which you can discuss whether it's right or wrong too, but regulation as well to encourage diverse representation. So there's clearly and I know about this legislation. I don't know if there was stuff like that in Brazil. Maybe there was, but the fact that it's important that America thinks it's important that it's important to express that there's this regulation belies that America values diversity. So there's a lot more rhetoric around it, which makes me believe that they really believe in it, that the culture really believes in diversion. And I think that was not as strong in Brazil. Like that language was not quite as strong, whether it was regulations as well. I mean, I went to an American school and but I went to an American school, it's not a Brazilian school. An American school would encourage diversity, but this was all in American school. So I associated this like push for diversity with American culture. But when I go to, I felt welcomed, but there was like, if I felt welcomed in other, maybe if I was taking Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class, like I felt welcomed. If I was playing soccer, I felt welcomed to a degree, but it wasn't as pomp. Like there's a lot of like pomp and bravado. I don't know if bravado is the right word, but a lot more rhetoric and just, yeah, excitement about diversity is, I think, the American culture in my experience. It was a little bit roundabout, but hopefully that made sense.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, I think our listeners will appreciate the distinction. Yeah,
The
because like
contrast.
you are in a singular, I don't know, spot where you can sort of like distinguish the two. Because like when I visited Sao Paulo, I thought it was just from like third person looking in
Yeah.
from the outside, it looked like a melting pot because of the different ethnicities that were in the city. But it's very different for you who have been like living there and like you have, as you said, you just said about your experiences, right? It's a different story. Yeah.
No, just all the language, but you don't like. I mean, I interned at a Brazilian company. Granted, it was like a Korean company, so there's just a lot of Koreans and a lot of Brazilians, but I don't know if I saw a lot of language of like diversity, champion of diversity and whatnot. But my experience with American companies, there's a lot of, and maybe this might be just California, but there's more language around like champion diversity and
Yeah.
whatnot. So yeah, that was my experience a little bit. There's just a lot more rhetoric and language around it too. But yeah, so for very similar reasons too, I would want to live in the States. And I've really liked my experience so far. And plus, I don't know if you mentioned this for yourself too. It feels safer compared to Brazil. Like if I were to raise a family, I wouldn't want to raise my family in a dangerous environment, all else equal. So
Yeah.
yeah, I feel safer here too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one too. Yeah, there's a lot of like just like bad experiences and stories that
Have you ever gotten mugged in Bolivia or?
No, but my mom has, yeah, and that was not nice. Like she was like,
Shaken up a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah, she
Yeah.
was.
My mom too. Yeah.
Yeah,
What was the
unfortunately, it didn't happen to me. But sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna ask if you don't mind sharing, what was the how did she get mugged?
Oh, she was just like walking down the neighborhood, and this guy came at gunpoint, and he wanted her purse and stuff and her personal belongings, right?
Yeah.
Um, and my mom was like holding onto her bag instead of like just
Oh,
giving it to her. So the guy just like sort of like, obviously the dude is stronger than my mom, right? Like
right,
my
right.
mom is like like a petite Asian lady.
Uh-huh.
So and she just like fell to the floor, and she was like trying to like hang to the hand. It was just like, yeah, and it's just so sad. There were like bystanders watching. I think in the States, like the bystanders would have said
Intervened.
something, or yeah, like be the good Samaritan or whatever, But yeah, the bystanders were just standing there. They're quietly observing. Only after the fact they offered her some water, and she got like, I think she actually was managed. She managed to get 10 Bolivianos, which is the equivalent of like $1.5 to get a cab back to the house.
Hmm.
Uh, she was just, yeah, it was so bad. Oh, our house got robbed once. Yeah, that was
Oof.
interesting. We
Were
went
you
to we went what?
were you living in an apartment or a house in Bolivia?
This was when I was living in a house. Yeah.
Got it. And did the house have any like walls around it too, or no?
We did have walls and fences, and we did have a security guard like
Uh-huh.
watching our street.
Uh-huh.
But what we think happened was the security guard probably knew everything in terms of like when we go out of the house and when we come into the house. And it was like a Sunday. It was like, I think we went to church, and then we grabbed dinner. We grabbed lunch.
Uh-huh.
So it was around noon. So we left the house, and then the security guard probably, I don't know, contacted his friends or whatever, because we had a very heavy, what do you call it, safe.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah, where I think we had some of our like personal belongings and like more expensive stuff and whatever, and cash. So they took that. So it's not a one man job, because that was like super heavy.
And they
At
broke
least
into
four or
that.
five people. They broke into the house. They took all of our like, I guess like
Oh my God.
my mom's jewelry, my parents like real like anniversary rings and stuff, and like,
Did they
yeah,
break
they
the
took
safe
the
as
safe.
well? Oh, they
They
took the
took it.
safe.
They took the
Oh.
whole thing, and it's just like so heavy. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not a one person job. So yeah, that was also interesting.
Oh man. How old were you when this happened?
um, I was a teenager, like 12 or 13.
Damn, how did you process that?
I think I was still too young, but I was always like in Bolivia. I was always aware that I had to be very alert when I was walking down the streets. I would always have to be alert with my pockets and stuff like that, just to make sure that, because as you said, it's in that sense is not as safe. South
Yeah.
America is not as safe as in the States. Like in New York, I don't have a problem like walking down the street with my phone.
Right, right.
Um,
But yeah, you'd have to be careful. Bolivia and in Brazil as well. At least for sure, Sao Paulo. So the day after, did you guys see the
mhm.
security guard or was he gone?
He was gone. Yeah, he was gone.
The
Yeah,
security guard was gone?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Wow. Okay. It was it
And
so
then,
were there like
yeah,
other
go ahead.
houses in like the complex, or was it just your house that the security guard was watching? Do you know what I
Yeah, it
mean?
was yeah, yeah. He was watching our entire street, so there were other houses. Yeah,
So he was responsible for like overwatching the
like a
street
one
for those
street.
houses as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Damn.
But the
Did
thing, the thing is, like, it's not. It wasn't only our house. Like, there were like a lot of other robberies, and like Yeah, stuff
In
like
that
that
same street?
happening
Oh,
in the neighborhood. Yeah,
oh my God.
in the neighborhood. And we lived in a so-called like safer neighborhood. But I guess like this was like a maybe like 15 years ago. So obviously
Yeah.
now we have like cameras and like uh, we have like proper like technology equipment installed in
Yeah.
the sense like if the house is like if someone breaks into the house, the alarm will go off, and then like the security like company or whatever will come to the house.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
It's
but yeah, it
better.
was interesting.
Your parents are still in Bolivia, huh?
Yeah. How
Yeah,
about
yeah.
yours?
Mine too. Mine too.
Do you go
Yeah.
back?
I used to every 2 years to maintain my
Okay.
Brazilian green card status, but the pandemic hit, so I wasn't able to go back. But now I have a green card in the States, so I'm actually I think comfortable relinquishing my Brazilian permanent resident status. But I mean, I feel I don't know if I would be inclined to go back to Brazil. I feel more inclined to travel somewhere with my parents to somewhere else. I do want to go to Amazon in Brazil. I keep mentioning this, but I've never been to the
Ooh.
Amazon. So that'd be nice. Um, yeah, but yeah, I don't go back that much. I don't. I go to São Paulo. I don't know if you really like São Paulo, but like if I go to São Paulo, I don't. You just be hanging out with my parents quite a bit, and it'd be a place that I've always been to anyway too.
Exactly.
Uh,
Same restaurants, same
yeah,
whatever. Yeah,
similar
yeah, yeah.
restaurant, same kind of yeah. And for me, you can't really go out as much too because again, it's dangerous a little bit, especially like past 5 p.m. when it gets dark. You don't want to be going out. Like our apartment complex had walls and barbed wire, and there was like 24 like large apartments in my complex, and there's a wall just encapsulating all of that. So that's what I was used to. And when I came to the States, there was none of that. And I was like so surprised, like there was not as much like theft or something. Um, but yeah, sorry to hear that you got mugged and whatnot. Hopefully, your family was still okay after that. Sounds like it was. So glad to hear it was
Yeah, we're
okay.
okay.
Yeah, my my
Thank you.
my family got the house didn't get mugged, but somebody mugged the office or they robbed the office, my dad's office.
Oh
My dad has
man.
like a solo office, but I don't think it was as shocking because it's not a home. I feel like if somebody invades your home, that is so you're supposed to feel safe at your home. So I think that
Yeah.
comes much more of a shock. So which was why I was, yeah, which was why I was like shocked about about that happening. But I think it does happen more frequent than you think. Um, and especially a security guard. The security guard's supposed to be like your source of security, and that person who's supposed to be that source of security
Yeah.
being the
Was
opposite of that must have been, I mean, that might have been a little bit traumatized by that. But I think that would really break my trust in like the institution of security in that country. I mean, my trust in the institution of security in Brazil is already not great either. But
hmm.
yeah, that experience would have probably really broken my trust. Yeah. Funny you say mugging too. I never got mugged in not funny, but I never got mugged in Brazil, but I got mugged in California. So I found
Oh,
that ironic. I never got mugged for 16 years in Brazil, but I got mugged in California, where it's supposedly safer. There was the guy did have you mentioned something about bystanders too, and when you were saying that,
yeah.
um, when I got mugged, there were students walking by, but nobody helped
Okay.
me in California.
What?
So, but it was hard to tell. It was like really dark. I don't know how when your dad, when your mom got mugged, but for me it was like pretty late. I was walking back from studying from the library. Some guy so stupid of me. The guy asks me, "Hey, can I borrow your phone to call my girlfriend?" I'm like hesitated a little bit. I'm like, I can't give you my phone, but I can call her for you, and then you guys can talk on speaker. So I approached the guy, and then I asked, "Hey, so what's the number?" And then before he even says it, some guy jumps out of the car that was parked like really near me, comes out, points a what looks like a gun, but also like a toy gun. I wasn't quite sure, so I wasn't.
Oh
I
man.
wasn't scared, but I was like busy assessing. Like, wait, is this a real gun or not? So I was like between the borderline of confusion and fear. Um,
Yeah.
and while that was happening, like your mom, uh, somebody grabbed my phone, but I didn't let go. So like your mom, I didn't let go. So there was a little bit of that. The gun was hard to see, but there are people walking by, and nobody said anything or stopped anything. And then you said, if it were in the States, maybe people would stop by. But in my head, I was like thinking, I'm not so sure, dude. I'm not so sure if they would. Because after that all happened, I think I wasn't mad at the people who stole my stuff as much, but I was more pissed at the people who just walked by, didn't do anything.
Bystanders.
Yeah, but I also, growing up now, looking back at that moment too, I don't think I would have wanted them to intervene. Who knows? It might have been unsafe for them. But maybe the least that they could have done is call the police or something. But just I I guess there's yes, by the bystander effect is harmful as well too. But part of me also understands why the bystander effect happens as well too. There's a lot of uncertainty sometimes. Like you don't know if it's
Yeah.
true or whatnot too. And sometimes you stepping in is harmful as well too. But
Yeah. Because you
yeah,
could also be harmed as a bystander trying to step in, you know?
yeah,
So,
right. But that's also why we call it the bystander effect and why we decry it as well, because there's also little things you can do that doesn't necessarily put you in harm's way, like calling the police, for example, saying like, hey, you know what? I think this person might be getting mugged. I'm not quite sure. You can still frame it that way too and try to support in that
right.
manner as well. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, that was my experience with mugging. Something I definitely learned after the experience was make sure if there's a car involved, you look at the license plate and try to memorize it. Because I didn't do that. I was just like, I didn't. It was my first experience getting mugged, so I didn't have quite the experience of like understanding what I should do. Um, but yeah, that story that you told about your mother, I was relating to in a different way in a different country.
Well, sorry that you had to go through that. Yeah.
It was okay. Yeah, I don't know if I was scared as much. Like in the end, when they were zapping away, I was able to keep my phone, but they took my wallet because I was not quite alert of that. And then as they left, I tried to say like, "Hey guys, I'm from Brazil. I'm a little bit poor. If you guys could give me back my wallet, that'd be great." I was trying to play up stereotypes and sympathy. I think they hesitated for a second, but they still ran away. So I still had like the presence of mind to try to get back my wallet. So it wasn't that bad. And in the end, I was safe as well. So that's
Wait,
all
so
right.
was it on your campus? Were you
Yeah, I
able
was on
to
my
call like
campus. Yeah.
campus police or
I
no?
called campus police, but this might be another cultural thing too. I didn't know if the number was 911 or 119 or something else. I don't know what the number is in Brazil. Like, I don't think it was 911 in Brazil, was it? But I just remember, remembering that the Korean emergency line
Yeah,
is
the Korean is
different.
opposite. Yeah,
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 it is
yeah.
different from the American one. So I was like, wait, what's the number? And I don't know why I was just a little hesitant to call both numbers. So it took me a while, but eventually I did reach it.
You're probably just in shock, you know,
There was a little
because
bit of shock probably too. Yeah.
yeah.
And I tried chasing the car too. Um, yeah, but there's no way I
Really?
was gonna do that. Yeah, kind of. Like it's like, oh, I think they'd be in this street maybe. So I like try to cut through campus to see if I can locate that car, but no success. But nonetheless, with every bad experience, there's a lesson to learn. So definitely learned a few
Yeah.
lessons, like making sure you look at the license plate. Don't give your phone to strangers, especially during night. Be careful. And if you do, you know what? I was gonna say, if you do that, make sure it's in a populous street. But I was in a busy kind of street, like not that busy, but there were still people walking by here and there. So yeah, I guess the lesson is don't give your don't give your phone to strangers in a night where it might be a kind of an empty street.
Noted.
Completely off topic, but so I looked at your LinkedIn profile and I
Yeah.
realized that you got the I don't know what that organization. Their awards. There's awards.
Yeah, I got that.
Yeah. So I was also a recipient too, which is another
Oh,
similarity. Which is another
that's
similarity I found.
great.
Yeah. When I got that award, I was so honored to receive that because it was such a first like global scale as well, and
Yeah.
then I think the people that received the award before me in my school, I really admired them too, respected them. So, but I thought I saw that was another similarity, yeah, between
That's
you and
so
me.
cool. I
Yeah.
mean, you're probably a lot more impressive than I am. So
No, not at all, dude. Not at all.
really humbled to be part of this cohort. You know,
No, dude. No, dude. Don't say that. You make me blush. Yeah.
that's so random. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I haven't been able to talk to other recipients to be honest. Yeah, I remember in my year like there was this like girl from India. There were like a few of us, but
Did you get to meet these
I didn't
other
get a chance.
recipients or not really?
No,
Yeah.
unfortunately, no. Yeah. Did you?
No, I don't think so. But I don't know if there was a conference where like the recipients were invited to. But I was appreciative of the scholarship that you got a little bit. Although it wasn't that much given like how expensive American college is for international students. But I was appreciative
Yeah.
of that. Yeah.
Yeah. That was cool. I think my parents were like, "Oh, that's cool, man. Like you got some money, you know?
Oh, really? I had to
You got some
explain.
money."
Yeah, I had to explain to my parents to fully understand it. But yeah, a little bit of money. I don't think it was taxed. Was it taxed? I don't remember. That was a foreign
Either
concept to me coming to the States, being taxed on stuff and
it's,
getting less money than I thought I would get.
yeah,
Um,
it was really sad when your bonuses are slashed
Slashed,
because of the
yeah. So
taxes. Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, I guess that would have been the case in Brazil as well too. It's just that we worked in the States, so that's when we were exposed to the experience of taxation.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, God, yeah. There's no similarity we shared.
That's cool. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I wasn't aware. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. How long have we been talking? Oh, about an hour and 20 minutes. Um, I did want to also ask, and maybe we can kind of close with this, but um, you seem to do you like you just I think based on what I've seen on your social media, you seem to like traveling, and I think you have a photography website, right? I think
Yeah. So it's just yeah. So my best friend, Pablo,
yeah,
he's a he's like a professional photographer. So that's how I like got into photography. Um, Obviously, I haven't done too much traveling during COVID, but yeah, I would say I'm not by no means like a travel photographer, but yeah, certainly I think a lot of millennials can relate. We're all like food Instagrammers or like travelers and photographers. But yeah, I do
hmm.
enjoy photography with like like just on my iPhone, but also with like a proper camera.
Yeah, and you like traveling
Uh,
as well.
I like traveling as well. I would say my favorite city recently in the world is Porto.
What country is that?
Porto in Portugal. Yeah,
Portugal. I've heard
yeah,
good things about Portugal. Small,
yeah.
not the biggest European country, but I hear it's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I think
interesting.
it's a hidden gem within
Yeah,
Europe. Yeah.
yeah. Do you think you having lived in so many in different countries, like living in Bolivia, which is very different from Korea, kind of when you go traveling, the magic of it and like how new it is doesn't strike you as hard, maybe as somebody who's lived predominantly in just one country their entire life and then going
Oh,
out? Because I feel that's the case for me. So I don't think I enjoy traveling as much. I don't know, maybe it might be a personality thing as well too, but I just feel like that aspect of like me having lived in a different country that's very different from a different country, like my Korean country, it's very different from Brazil, and just me understanding like countries can be so different, so it doesn't strike me as I think as novel when I go to a different country. But you like traveling, so I wanted to ask, do you if
I
you
totally, yeah.
you relate in a way or
No,
you
I
don't?
totally understand where you're coming from because you already have these like these themes that you've identified in the different countries. But for me, it's like every time I travel, it's like a different color or different taste or different thing that I can add on to that built-in like model that I have.
Uh-huh.
Meaning, if I when I went to Spain, when I went to Barcelona, I thought it was like very culturally like very similar to what I was used to in Bolivia because a lot of like the Spanish culture.
Yeah.
But I was still appreciative of like the many different things that they had to offer, architecture wise, food wise, culture wise, and then let's say when I went to London, London was in a way like similar to New York, like very busy metropolitan city, but at the same time very different because it's British. So like just
Yeah.
like playing around, like just having this like Venn diagram of like what you're used to and what is new, and like seeing like what can be layered together and what's different. It's sort of it's an added experience into my collection of experiences.
Right. But I don't know if it's a controversial question, but if you grew up in the States your entire life, let's say, do you think you would have been more appreciative of the travels you had? Like you would have been
Yes, for
more,
sure.
yeah.
And in a way, that's
Yeah, I
why
think so
I'm sort
too.
of like, I kind of like the whole thing of like going to Africa to like for a humanitarian trip kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
Um, because well, I have several reasons, but one of the reasons is like I grew up in a third world country myself. So
Yeah.
if I had the chance to do like a humanitarian thing, I would rather go back to Bolivia or somewhere in South America to make an impact rather than
Mm,
Africa. But then at the same time, this whole idea of like, I grew up in the States my entire life and I go to Africa for a week, and I take some cute pictures and do humanitarian stuff. I don't know. It just doesn't resonate with me.
really? That's interesting. But
Yeah.
Africa is such a different continent compared to probably where you lived, right?
But
Bolivia.
like let's say yeah, but let's say I grew up like I can think of places that need help within my vicinity in New York or
Uh-huh.
even Bolivia. Like why do I have to go to like Africa to help out?
You don't feel that pull
Is
as
it for
much.
yeah, is it for my ego or like is it for me to feel good about it or like
Mm-mm-mm. I always do say sometimes, not I always say this, but sometimes we do something selfless because in being selfless, there's some personal fulfillment we feel. So sometimes the selfless act is somewhat based in selfishness, which is the bad thing. The fact that you feel personal fulfillment in a selfless act by itself, I think is something that should be applauded and encouraged. Um, but yeah, that's it's a deep kind of an observation you're making of yourself. Maybe it's for your own ego or whatnot. I think for me it would be, yeah, I'd be the opposite. I think surprisingly you and I have the opposite reaction. If I would have to do something humanitarian, you're right. Doing something humanitarian. I always thought about, if I'm just to do something humanitarian, I would think about going back to Brazil as well too, because they're just so pocked with so many issues as well. But
yeah.
I I would want to go to, if I had to choose and if I was able to, I think I would like to explore going to Africa, um, if it was doing something humanitarian as well too. Sure, there are some selfish reasons, like it's a completely different continent. Con- of all the many continents, Africa would be something that I think would be very different, which would also make it more exciting for me to go.
Mm,
And I feel like the extent of the issues I've seen in Africa is graver than it is in Brazil. Like you just in his at least in current events, um, and just a plague of diseases that Africa might suffer. Um, yeah, this might just be a misunderstanding on my part too. But I feel like Sao Paulo was a little bit more developed, but I feel like there's going to be a lot more countries in Africa that might be not as developed. And also, Africa has this perception of this rich animal kingdom compared to
yeah.
Brazil. I mean, Brazil's pretty tropical and there's like a lot of animals too, but we don't have elephants that are like native to the land too. Um,
Yeah.
so I think that sounds exciting as well. So I kind of have the opposite reaction. I would want to go to Africa. That's interesting that you would
Yeah,
have
that's
that reaction, even though we have similar
well,
backgrounds.
yeah, and I totally see where you're coming from. I just like, I guess, like respectfully disagree.
Huh. Interesting.
Well, we just have like different thought processes, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. It just makes me curious as to, well, like you and I have similar backgrounds. What are the things that are in our life and how we process things that will lead us to make these like different decisions? This is just one decision, which might not be like big in the grand scale of things too. But
Yeah.
if anything, I
Well,
feel
in a
like
way,
if like of all the people that I've met so far, I feel like you have many similar elements with in terms of background with me
yeah.
that I don't find much with like even my best friends as well too. So that's why I'm even more curious. Like, oh wow, how our decision making process can be so different. I'm coming from a place of intrigue than challenge right now. But yeah, I'm
No,
intrigued.
me too. So
Yeah.
it's actually pretty cool to see that like we have so many like similarities, but at the same time, due to our personality or whatever, like we think about things quite differently. So I actually appreciate that. So
This
thank you
might,
for
yeah. I mean, this might be an example of maybe there are really inherent personality traits, but no matter how much there's nurture around
yeah,
us, that still remain with us. Even if you're weird in a similar manner, there's going to be inherent personality traits that make you a different person. Because that classic argument with like nature versus nurture. I'm sure you and I are probably not the best examples in an experiment or study like that too. But
yeah,
it makes me think maybe we are examples of how nurture is not as strong as nature sometimes. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
pretty cool.
All right. Well, um, I'm sure there's a lot more we can talk about, but I think this was great already, and we've already like hit the 1 hour and a half mark around. So I think we can wrap it up here. I'll say thank you to our listeners. Thanks for listening. Stephen, if you want to share your social media link so that people can follow you if you want, feel free to share it here if you like. If not, completely okay too. If you want to share your photography website too, feel free to share it as well. If not, again, completely okay. Would you want to share any of those?
Yeah, I'm not super big in social media, but I think it's what's my Instagram?
You don't have to if you don't want to again, but just offering you the
Okay.
opportunity.
Well, I'll just leave it as it is for now. Yeah.
Sounds good. All right. Well, yeah, thanks for contacting me, dude. This wouldn't have happened if you didn't contact me. So I'm glad I met you all the
Yeah.
way across the coast.
No,
Another brother from South America.
thank you for hosting me. Yeah, you've been a wonderful host, and it was a pleasure to participate in this conversation, learn more about myself, and also learn more about like different TCKs. Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Sounds good. Let's keep in touch, dude.
All right. Sounds good. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye bye.